Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thought for the Week. We are in the second part of our series on choosing relationships and choosing the things that Jesus would choose in relationships. So last week we talked about choose to listen and how hard it is to listen in relationship, but how important it is to choose to listen. Just like in our discipleship, it's important to listen to the Lord's voice over other voices. But it's also a discipline that we have to practice. Well, this week, we're going to talk about choosing to serve. Choosing to serve. Now, so often in relationships, whether it's a friendship or a colleague or a marriage, it's very easy when we're across from another human to want to be in competition with that human rather than in a healthy relationship. And so think about the relationships in your life today. Think about the people that you come across regularly, those you love. Maybe it's a family member or a person that you manage at work. What is your posture towards that person? And what we want to talk about today is how can we choose to serve? Choose to serve rather than choose to fight, perhaps, or choose to compete. What would it look like to choose to serve some of the most important people in your life? We talk about this a lot in marriage counseling, how it's so easy to feel like you're in competition with your spouse instead of on the same side, holding arms linked, going in the same direction. What would it look like to choose to serve? I think one of the images that's helpful for me when I think about this in relationships is whether or not I'm holding a fist up to the person across from me or whether or not my hands are open. This is a servant's posture. And can I have an open-handed servant's posture to the people that I love? Or am I holding on to something? And what is it that I'm holding on to? So often when we're coming against the people in our lives, it's because we're fearing the loss of something. Maybe we're angry, but we know anger at its height is really a signal of a different emotion underneath, a fear of losing something. So what would it look like to not fear so much the people around us, but to serve them, to love them? And of course, our whole series is on how Jesus did this. Jesus is the servant king, right? He's not the my way or the highway king. He's not the respect at any cost king. Jesus is the servant king, the servant king. He could have come in power. In fact, that's what the believers at the time were expecting him to do, come in power, take over the Roman government. But instead, he came in humility. Scripture says that he chose not just to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. He could have chosen equality with God, something to be grasped, but he didn't. And he laid down his life and he served. So what would it look like instead of having a power struggle with the people in our lives to open up our hands and to serve? It's probably hardest to serve the people in your life who don't serve you very well. But think about Jesus's model. Jesus chose to serve us when we weren't serving God very well, when the people of God weren't necessarily being the most faithful or the most obedient. So serving, like many other choices we make in relationship, isn't contingent on how well we're being served. But can we take the choice to serve? Can we say, Jesus, will you help me serve some of my hardest relationships in my life right now? Will you help me in this work situation to not choose the power or trying to gain respect by just bulldozing my way in there, but will you help me to see how to serve my team? Will you help me see how to serve my kids instead of sort of luring the control over them or wanting to have everything in my life go just the way I want it? But Lord, what does it look like to serve in my community? What does it look like to be open-handed, to be humble? Instead of pointing fingers at people around me, what does it look like for me to walk as Jesus did with a heart of humility? I did a wedding a few years ago in London, and it was for a young couple. They were in their early 20s, and they were good friends, and I was doing the sermon. And in the sermon, I talked about Jesus's humility and how Jesus chooses to be humble. And at the end of the service, at the reception, I had a few people come up to me and ask me the question, what was that word you used in your sermon? And of course, I went through lots of different words that I thought they meant until I realized what they meant was the word humble or humility. It's a lost word in our culture, and it's a lost word for a generation, it appears, especially those outside the church. What does it look like to choose humility, to model humility? And humility is laying down our way, and it's being willing to serve. Not because we're being treated that way necessarily in reciprocation, but because Jesus chose to serve. And when we serve others, when we lay down some of that control and some of that fight for power or competition, what happens is we're trusting Jesus. We're saying, Jesus, I trust you more than I trust this other person. I trust God to take care of all of my needs more than this other person. And thus I have the freedom to serve. I have the freedom to be open-handed because God, you're the one who's actually fighting for me. So this week, as we go into our second week of Lent, as we're thinking about laying things down that have come between us and God, maybe for you, this is one of those. Maybe laying down that power struggle in relationships and choosing to serve the people that are most important to you because Jesus chose to serve us, especially when we didn't deserve it. So may you have a wonderful week, choosing to listen and choosing to serve, and then tune in next week for our last choice in relationship. Have a great week. Bye.